Hello, strangers. Don't touch that dial. You've tuned in to Neon Static, where once a week, one true, scary story is here for you. Brought to you by your host, Viola. That's me. And this week's story is a more modern, scary story. The dangers of the online world, where something can appear nice and friendly, but be anything but. So update that virus protection that you've been putting off. Sit back and let me tell you story 23. And here's what happened. We may have broken up, but we still liked each other enough to live together. At least I told myself that. But as another night stretched on, and I heard another muffled conversation drift from her room, she'd moved out of our master to the spare guest room when we'd finally broken up. I knew I couldn't actually deal. I couldn't blame her. We were broken up, but she'd been the one to do it, so of course she'd already moved on. She'd known it was over before I did, and my fresh heartbreak simply wasn't a thought she'd have. We'd been together for 3 years, and I was reeling, seasick on a ship that had slid off course. Wanting a distraction, or wanting to bring a random voice home to gloat down the hallway and plague her like she plagued me, I went online and started looking around at online dating sites. We were near a major metropolitan area, so the sites showed a ton of people. But as I clicked through the profiles, sent a few messages, I wasn't pulling any great numbers. The girls there seemed foreign. After years of learning a girl inside and out, they might as well have been from another planet, unknowable beyond their cliché bios about loving coffee, wine, and having fun. Oh, good, as opposed to girls that loved to not have fun. But I kept my search up, and like another cliché goes, it happens when you're not looking. Or in my case, where you're not looking. The girl in this story didn't come from one of the dating sites. She came from, of all places, an online game lobby. My friends and I played a lot of those free games, poker, blackjack, whatever. It was more to have something to chat about on voice chat. Randoms could and would wander in and join. And one night, the random was a girl I'll call Simone. Right away, we clicked. Unlike the sparse interactions I'd had, artificially sweet yet bland conversations that went nowhere, Simone's voice was a living, bright spark amongst the gravelly lower register voices of my friends. And she could talk freely, like it wasn't a chore to acknowledge a joke or something me and my friends said. Simone was charming, and after a few nights, that voice started mending something in me. She talked to me like she wanted to. Just when I started to have second thoughts or second guess it, think I was just making it all up in my head, she was just being nice, I woke up to a direct message to my gamer tag. She'd taken the trouble to make the first move. Well, I was game to see where this went. We started spending a lot of time voice chatting each other. I mean, I still had a job, so it wasn't like 100% of my time, but certainly a larger portion than usual was spent online talking with her. She was kind and funny, and having that feminine whisper in my ear gassing me up, it was pretty great. We were a week or two into talking a lot to each other, and I got the party started, so to speak, by sending her a picture of me. No, not that kind of picture. Just a normal picture where she could see my face, what I looked like, and she could decide from there if she wanted to continue the flirting or drop off. Of course, she was incredibly sweet. She said my picture was hot, pushing us further into more and more adult chat. But she didn't respond with a picture back. I know what you're thinking, but I was really drawn to this girl for stuff other than what she looked like. So being too pushy with her to get a photo back felt too risky. I was nervous. Still, I couldn't help but want to put a face to her voice. It took about a week to work up the courage, and then I asked. Luckily, she acted like it was an afterthought, and she sent over a selfie. It was just above her shoulders, and she was very cute. Tilted up button nose, startlingly blue eyes. This sort of innocent, looking up at the camera look. I let her know I thought she was a smoke show, and she thanked me and giggled. Over the next week, I sent her more pics. Not gonna lie, I liked what I saw. I wanted to see more, and I wanted to show her I was willing to go first. I was posing in the mirror for one of those accidentally flexed pictures. Judge me all you want, you've all done it. When my ex wandered by, wanting to see if I wanted to go to the gym with her. She got that grin she'd get when she was amused, and asked, "Well, hey there, bud. What you doing?" With a bit of "so there," I told her I was just taking pictures for this new girl I'd met online. The sarcasm faded, but the smile remained. Looking back, I'd wanted my ex to be a little crushed, I guess. That she wasn't. She was actually really supportive and offered to take pictures for me at the gym. Hurt me in a way I didn't expect. I'm telling you this detail because, for the next 2 weeks, I ended up making some obviously terrible choices. Decisions I was and am way too smart to have made. I think deep down, I wasn't over my ex, and it was that emotional pain that had me acting reckless. I did find other pics to send to Simone, though. She gushed over them, a little too much, but I was a dumb, hurt dude and I ate it up. But she still didn't reciprocate. When I did ask for another picture, she hesitated, then told me a bit of her background. She was an actual gamer, like ranked play in a popular MMORPG, and attractive. Over the years, this combination had brought her more than one stalker. For example, she'd had a creep find out her home address by piecing together street signs in the backgrounds of her photos. Then he took a run at those creepy white-page data collection sites until he'd found her unique name. He'd then started sending her gifts. Freaked out and feeling a little held hostage to placate him. He knew where she lived. Nothing was stopping him from just showing up. She moved apartments. But 3 weeks later, he'd sent another gift to her new address. What was worse yet? She'd recently given birth to her daughter. Yes, this was the first time she'd mentioned she had a kid to me too. So it was both of their safety in jeopardy. She'd closed and abandoned her accounts, opened new ones. She giggled, calling herself paranoid, but explained how, after this had happened, she started only using one selfie profile pic, a close-up, across all of her socials at a time. She'd rotate it with another, occasionally, and only with pictures she'd thoroughly scrubbed for any clues as to her location. I was a bit taken aback by all this, not the least of which was the admission she had a kid. I was only 20 at the time, but I'd known since I was a kid that I didn't want to have any myself. I told her I had to get to the gym, played it cool, but inside I was feeling kind of unsettled at how, after so much time getting to know her, I really didn't know much at all. My mood was picked up on by my ex, but after all that bragging to her about Simone, my pride couldn't take another blow. So I talked Simone up like I was cool with all of it, dropping the having a kid detail like it was a bonus. Hey, this way she'd never feel like she missed out on motherhood, right? My ex looked disconcerted, but told me if that was okay with me, that was all that mattered. But that was also the first time she gave me the whole be careful talk. In the car on the way to the gym, not quite making eye contact, she said, "You never know who you're really talking to online, you know?" I kinda lashed out at her, telling her not to mother me, and when we got to the gym, I was headphones on and ignored her the whole time. When I got home, I logged back into my tablet, got Simone's one picture out, and dropped it into TinEye. That was the image search engine of choice back then. I was mad as hell at my ex for caring about me. What, like now she decides to? But also because she was right. You do never know who you're really talking to online. Quite a few hits popped up, various accounts on the usual gaming forums and console accounts. And all of them belonged to Simone. Well, at least that checked out. We kept talking. I convinced myself she was legit. After all, I could literally hear her voice. The stalker stories made sense. Even my ex had had a few guys she'd dated before or had been friends with online, and she told me about having to block them herself. I never asked Simone to go on webcam out of this respect for her need for privacy. Plus, this was the early aughts. FaceTime and everyone having a laptop with an embedded camera were years away. But after this, like her telling me about the creepers in her past with a cork in a bottle, Simone started sharing more. More stories of lovelorn pervs on the internet, harassing her for being a girl in gaming, for not giving them nudes, just really awful stuff. Stories about her and her emotionally abusive ex, who thanks to the great state of Utah being so family values centric, still had occasional custody of their now 3-year-old child, Dusty. And how sometimes he would forget to pay his child support. And how she and Dusty would have to go without electricity or internet because she couldn't pay the bill. I was trying so hard to be understanding, the kind of guy Simone could trust when so many others had let her down. And again, I just couldn't let my ex be right. So when, coincidentally, a week later the bill for her internet came, and her ex hadn't sent that month's check, I woke up to panicked messages on my phone. It was a real dire situation. Simone was risking extra data charges she couldn't afford to reach out and ask for help. I silenced all the alarm bells. With the notion of being a hero to her when so many others had failed, it was surprisingly easy to do. Besides, $60 wasn't so much to pay. I was smitten. However, I was also not completely stupid. I drove to a Target and bought a loadable credit card, deposited the $60, and then called and gave her the details. She was effusively grateful, even rewarded me with another picture the second I'd received of her. She told me she took it just for me. It was again another shoulders and above shot, blowing me a kiss. And she looked so cute. I felt great about being able to help her out. At least, I did until my ex came home a few hours later from grocery shopping. She came into my room holding the bag and prepaid credit card packaging to see if I needed it before she threw it away. One of our usual fights was about me being kind of a slob. I'd left my trash on the kitchen counter. Sometimes I wonder if I did that on purpose, so someone could see it and call me out on what was clearly a bad idea. But at the time, I was focused on my ex, and she was looking pissed. Pissed at someone scamming me for money, but also pissed at me for falling for it. Did I listen? Of course not. It was far easier for me to act out and fight with my ex on my new girl's behalf. I mean, the fact that she even cared enough to fight with me about it meant that she wasn't over me, and I had effectively won the breakup. And that's when my ex laid out a number of things. See, all this time I thought she'd sort of moved on past me, wasn't paying attention anymore. But she had been. She laid out that the fact that I'd heard a female voice on the phone meant nothing, and all it meant was that somebody had access to a friend or accomplice. That the one picture for safety made literally no sense. She could just choose not to put out any pics at all. Chumming the waters with 1 to 2 pictures would still bring her attention. And as for the guy sending stuff to her home, what was more likely? That she had a stalker who was able to track the movements of a girl moving out of state, expend the time and cost to send her a package? Or something more innocuous? Hell, if it freaked her out so much, why didn't she take the package to the police, where they could easily compel Amazon to look up who was using their business and the USPS to harass a girl? All these questions, I had no answers. But I did have my anger at my ex and a mounting feeling of embarrassment that I'd potentially been scammed in full view of her. I felt hurt and angry, and since Simone wasn't there and I couldn't yell at myself, I instead exploded on my ex. Really just let loose the poison in my gut about how awful I felt and viciously wanted her to feel. To her credit, she turned on her heel and walked away after a near solid minute of me yelling at her. I kept going, unable to stop the flow I'd let loose, even as I heard the jingle of her car keys, heard the front door open and close, and the deadbolt click. I still had all this energy and a need to use it, and riding high on having gotten something off my chest and hurt my ex the way I'd hurt when she'd moved on so quickly, I made the worst decision of the whole saga. I called Simone up and told her I wanted to meet out in the real world. She seemed stunned, but then excited, and that was all I needed to book my ticket from Baltimore to Salt Lake City. With Simone's high-tempo encouragement in my ear, I requested my vacation, booked my hotel and rental car, and I relayed all the details to her. The trip was a few weeks out, but time flew. My ex and I still carpooled to the gym and shared the occasional Netflix movie, but after I'd let her have it, she seemed distant and guarded. Deep down, I guess I felt bad for hurting her, but then again, breakups sucked for everyone and misery loves company. I didn't tell her about my plans or flight, though. I didn't want to rub salt in her wound, but I left a note so she wouldn't think I'd disappeared. It gave when I'd be back, the flight numbers, just the dry basics as a just in case. The trip to Utah was uneventful, but when I got on the road in my rented Toyota, I started to get a bad feeling. For those of you who have never driven through the Beehive State, it's fairly desolate and empty out the windows. It's very different from metropolitan Maryland. I felt lonely. It started to hit me that I, too, was very much out here on my own. I had no friends to call in as cavalry should my car break down, or the bank freeze my card on a suspected fraud alert due to an out-of-state charge. Or, going back to my ex's words, if Simone wasn't who she'd presented herself to be. How had I, a pretty intelligent dude who'd made it through a 4-year degree in 3 years, ended up on the other side of the country, alone, speeding down a strange highway towards a person I only knew from 2 pictures, and a voice late at night. That voice. Just as I had that thought, I felt my phone vibrate in my pocket. Simone. For the first time, the thought of hearing her voice didn't make me happy. That small bad feeling was starting to grow. Nevertheless, I fished the clunky Bluetooth earpiece from the center console where I'd left it and hit accept. Looking back now, the fact that my ex's voice greeting me gave me a stab of hope is when I figured out this whole trip, and maybe this whole Simone thing, was a mistake. My ex's voice was steady, concerned but intent on relaying what she'd found. For as before, when she'd prepared for me a list of evidence, things that she'd noticed, things she found suspect. Since our epic blowout, she'd continued digging. When I greeted her, she cut me off. "For God's sake, Ben, that's super nice of you, but listen, I gotta tell you about Simone." She emphasized Simone's name in a way I could almost visualize, like I could see her making the bunny ear finger quotes as she said it. And so, over the next 42 minutes, my ex revealed the following. For one, Simone was her middle name. Something uncovered when my ex dug into Googling the given name, let's say it was Simone Smith, and piecing back together potential relations from a handful of white pages, she'd found her real name, and her real name was Paula. My ex had also searched the few usernames and handles Simone had on the gamer forums I'd contacted her on, because people do tend to reuse those. Sure enough, my ex found forgotten and abandoned profiles on a lot of social media sites that had fallen off as other sites had taken on the crown. Notably, my ex had found a page last updated 7 years prior that somehow had the picture of her blowing a kiss at the camera posted on it. The same picture she'd claimed to have just taken from me a month ago. So how long ago were those pictures actually taken? The final and most obvious thing found out was about the stalker she brought up as rationale for why she didn't post pictures. You remember him, the creeper whose end game was to send gifts in the mail, potentially to indicate or threaten that he knew where she was. Well, that's a lot less creepy when you find out, as my ex did, that Simone, well, guess I should call her Paula, had a public Amazon wish list. The address was hidden, but Amazon assured all potential buyers that they'd get any of the requested gifts to the recipient, no problem. That in itself wasn't too unusual. but that the whole ordeal had been painted as something lurid and scary when Paula told me about it, when in actuality, it was a known list that she had been updating. That bad feeling I got driving me through Utah grew more teeth. The one that struck me kind of by surprise, that had me pulling over for a minute just to process the sheer amount of data coming, was the last thing my ex found. Or rather, couldn't find. Dusty, the 3-year-old daughter. There was nothing, not even on the creepy white pages, to prove her daughter existed, had ever been born. Even though, as my ex rightly called out at the beginning, I'd always leaned towards child-free. The discovery upset me a lot more than I'd thought. Who lies about having a kid? I don't know, man. There were just a lot of feelings happening all at once. Sadness, grief, embarrassment. But the biggest, growing like a frog crawling up my throat, was anger. I guess I was pretty quiet on the phone, because my ex had to repeat my name a couple of times to get my attention. I snapped to as she spoke, saying she didn't tell me all of this to be a jerk or bring me down, but to warn me and ask me to come back. She said, "Please, Ben, we have no idea who this person is. They've already been hitting you up for money. I'm just..." A pause. "I'm scared, okay?" Another shot of hope. She'd taken 3 weeks of the cold shoulder from me on the chin and went on trying to make sure I'd be okay, I'd be safe. But as I saw the exit sign showing 2 miles to my hotel's exit up ahead, I thought through it again. I wanted my ex. I wanted to agree with her, to ease that worry from her voice. But if I hooked a U on the highway and bailed now, when I was closer to the truth of things than I'd been with Paula before, I knew I'd always wonder. If nothing else, I was going to confront her. The same anger I'd vented out on my ex was now looking for a new home. And that new home was named Paula. How dare she scam me? I was going to make her answer for it, if nothing else. Make this trip worth something more than the cost. So I drove on. I made my exit and followed the 1 to 2 turns to the hotel. I pulled in, sat a moment, then flicked the ignition off. That isolated, bleak feeling wouldn't go away. Neither, it appeared, would my ex's incessant calls and texts. I cleared another notification and thumbed over to Simone's contact. I sent a "made it" text with a picture of the hotel through the windshield of the rental car, then walked up to the lobby and checked in for my reservation, a room on the ground floor. Another 2 buzzes from the phone in my hand as I finished up at the concierge desk, heading back to the car to get my bag. Text 1, my ex. "Please, please, Ben, pick up." The other from Simone. "OMG, what room?" with 3 smiley faces. I tapped out the first numbers of my room, but as I stared down at Paula's text, like a delayed response, all the worry that I'd heard from my ex's voice seeped into my own growing fear. There was curiosity, and I was naturally curious, but curiosity also had a way of killing cats. Who knew what else it would kill? So instead, I slumped down in the passenger seat of my car and closed the door behind me, giving myself a moment to think. My thumb continued to hover over the 2 texts. 2 girls, both begging for a response. One wanting to see me, the other warning me that to be seen might be the most dangerous thing I'd ever done. Just when I'd think I'd made a decision, one way or the other, I'd pause and then reconsider it all again. But as I did, movement caught my eye. A rusty old sedan, dark maroon and dented, had come rolling into the parking lot. I was a big fan of nature documentaries and thought immediately of how gazelles seemed to know when the rustle of grass behind them was the wind, some rodent making a burrow, or a 900-pound tiger. Gazelles snapping their necks up and bolting before the attack. That image just played over in my mind as I stared at this car. That same animal instinct that the gazelles showed was now in me, and it told me 2 things. 1, this car was Simone, rather, Paula. And 2, This was the dumbest thing I'd ever done. I held my breath, sliding into the back seat of the car and blessing whatever underpaid Avis drone had applied window tint to the car I'd rented. I had turned to the left when I'd pulled into the parking lot, and I excelled as they turned right, parked, and stopped the car. It rocked a bit. The doors sprang open. Yes, doors. 2 large men exited the driver's side and back seat. The passenger's shotgun then creaked open. With some effort, out came a woman. Her brown hair swung in the light, the streaks of gray catching in the sun like shards of mirror glass. Even at a distance, I could see the deeply set wrinkles bracketing her nose and mouth, creasing her eyes and brow. This girl, this woman, was either pushing 50 or it had a rough go of her 30s. My gut just sank. Even at the distance, and even with the age, there was something in the tilt of the head, the short height, the shape of the nose, to tell me my instinct was right. This was Paula. Paula and 2 unannounced, scary friends. She adjusted her sunglasses and swung a hand at the car door, clubbing it shut. I sat bolt upright, still as she seemed to scan the parking lot, her head tracking left to right. Another shaky exhale escaped me as her gaze slid past the rental car, regarding it and seeming to discard it in her survey. She turned, said something to the other 2 who'd gotten out of the car, whoever the hell they were, and they slowly began walking towards the hotel. Ben? Ben? I nearly pissed myself before I looked down. Not only had my thumb hit my ex's text, it had hit the button to call. I pulled it to my ear slowly, and very quietly, as though the trio could hear me, I said, "They're here." "What?" came my ex screeching back, and I had to tell her not to call 911 as I slid back up into the driver's seat, keyed the ignition, and made good my escape. I doubted the 3 of them could do the 100-meter dash to catch up, but I goosed the accelerator all the same getting out of there. I drove back to Salt Lake, my ex with me on the phone the whole way. She'd found a budget-friendly flight for the next morning. It was a crappy seat in the very back with no reclining that the airline had been unable to fill. And as I hit the city, she navigated me to another hotel, in which she'd already booked me a room. I pulled in, parked my generic silver car in its second generic parking lot, and my hands began to shake so hard I hit the horn a bit, hearing its tepid economy car bleat, like, "Excuse me." I mumbled something about needing to go in and lie down, and my ex's voice, warm and sweet, told me that was good, the best idea. Something in that voice just broke me. The fear, and how close I'd come to something really, really bad. The months of cooing and flirting with a lady old enough to be my mom. How she must have mocked me to her 2 large friends. And why had she brought them? What were they there to do? And how awful I'd been to my ex. How she'd been quietly trying to help me. How angry I was, wanting someone to blame for all of this. I broke down in the car. I was just overwhelmed. The phone went quiet as my ex let me have a minute to get it all out. Then she came back over the line, her voice gentle. "Well, look on the bright side. This place has a pool." The sobs switched to laughs. She hung in there, laughing with me. The rest of the trip from hell was uneventful. Sleep, drive to the airport, turn in the car. The refund for not needing it for the full 5 days helped with the additional flight's cost. And fly back to Baltimore. My ex was waiting for me at home. She obviously wanted to talk, but was kind enough to let me broach the subject first. And I did. We talked all night. While my ex and I didn't get back together in the flush of this experience, she still had her stuff to figure out, and I obviously still had mine. She and I had started as friends, and now we're even better ones. As for Simone, when I finally brought myself to log in, I saw with relief that her accounts were completely gone. She'd either blocked me on everything we'd talked on or deleted them. My response was to compile a list of those accounts, both those I had and my ex had found, and sent it wide like a severe storm warning to all my contacts. I'd take their jokes and laughter at how I'd been taken in by a hustle if it meant I could save one more guy like me from a surprise encounter in a hotel room with 2 uninvited guests. Story 23. One of the first stories that I wrote down. There's a lot cut out of it. A lot more detail that was found. None of it good. But you get the gist. At the end of the day, you never know who you're talking to. So be careful out there. If you liked the story or have your own catfish experience to share, please feel free. Socials and email are in the description as always. And liking, commenting, and subscribing, always appreciated. But I'm just delighted that you listened in today. And tune in next week when we do it all over again. Until next time, take care, strangers.